What's going on, guys? Matt at Middles Motorsports here. Another episode of Behind the Tune. So, 2020 Mustang GT, Coyote engine. This is a manual trans car. So this car came to us last year. I don't know if I did a video on this one last year, but it had a Roush Supercharger on it. And we did a couple mods to it to try to improve the cooling of the Roush Supercharger. And we did a different brick in it. And he still wasn't too happy with the performance of it. So he brought it back this summer for us to do a Whipple. So he purchased his own Whipple through Lethal Performance. And we installed it for him. So this is a stage 2 setup. So it's got the bigger intake, bigger throttle body. This car does have a fuel system on it. It has a return style fuel system with twin pumps. It has FIC 1200 port injectors, obviously stock DI injectors, being Gen 3 Coyote. It's got the DI and the port injection. It's got long tube headers on it, and it's got a Corsa Extreme muffler setup on it, which is loud. It's very loud, but and it's got it's an X pipe with the Corsa mufflers. Otherwise, yeah, your basic supercharged Coyote setup with headers. There's nothing else fancy going on here. We are on the base Whipple 3875 pulley. We are going to stick with the 3875 pulley. We do have a 3.6. We just talked to the customer, and I know in the world of internet and Coyote, the vast world of Coyote modifying out there, guys push these cars harder. I like being conservative with them because you start pushing, in my opinion, once you start pushing these things over 850 to the wheels, you just drop, the reliability just exponentially drops off once you go from there. Yes, you can make 900. Yes, you can make 1,000. But once you get up into those upper power, those big power figures like that on a stock rod, stock bottom end deal, it's gonna break. Eventually you will break a rod. If you keep it down where we're at right now, it will live a long life. You can still hurt stuff, obviously, but it will last way longer sub 850 than it will north of 900. So we just talked to him about it, and he said, you know what, let's leave it conservative. He's not out there trying to set the world on fire and break records and beat up on his local street scene, whatever. He's totally happy. We just talked to him with where it's at right now. So, and this is where I'm at right now. So before we put this thing on the dyno, I was like, as long as if we're making less than 800, I'd like to switch the pulley. If we're making more than 800, we're going to leave the pulley alone. And we're kind of right on that fence. And so it should, I think if I do a kind of a hero pull with a little bit of a cool down, it's going to make 800. It's really hot and sticky here today. Obviously, it's July and in the Midwest, and we get the same hot, humid weather the rest of the nation sees for the most part. And so the air isn't good. Obviously, we're correcting with a correction factor with SAE, but once you get really hot and sticky like this, you just, on top of what the correction factor is trying to correct for the poor air, you are just physically running less boost because there's just less air to grab. So for the supercharger to grab and boost up, basically, I mean, that's kind of the explanation I have, is the air gets less dense, it gets more filled with water, there's less oxygen, and there's less of it for the supercharger to draw in, compress, and shove into the engine. So you do end up with lower power numbers, and the supercharged cars definitely get hit with, supercharged. The heat soak is there, plus just the air is just thick, and I shouldn't say thick, but it feels thick. Full of water, it's humid, and less dense with oxygen. So yes, would we see over 800 on a 50-degree crisp day, even though the correction factor would be probably pulling some power off the uncorrected? Yeah, but because it's so hot and humid, again, we're probably down. I'm only seeing 11 pounds of boost. The last car I did with a Gen 6 Whipple on it was a Mach 1. We did a video on that one. That made 12 pounds of boost, but it was in earlier this spring, and it was definitely cooler out. So and that was making 12 pounds boost, you know, same type of setup. This car is on E85. That car was on pump gas 93. So, and maybe I didn't mention that. We are running E85 in this. So this is just a straight E85 tune. Like I said, it does have a fuel system. So, and this car kind of came to us with a hodgepodge of stuff going on. It had a Roush on it, and it had been tuned with NSCT handheld through another shop who he can't get a hold of. So I wasn't able to get a factory file for it. We're gonna run back through this car again in the fall and probably get a flex fuel setup on it through PCM Tech. But I'm unable to flash a stock, and that's I'm kind of getting off subject here, but was unable to flash stock file into it with the Ford IDS tools, a VCM3 and the Ford IDS. For whatever reason, something is going on with the PCM where I can flash with HP tuners, which is what I'm doing right now. And he was okay with that for now, but he does want to retain, or he does want to be able to do a flex fuel setup eventually in the future. So we'll revisit that later. So for now, we're just tuning on E85, and he was perfectly happy with that. So what we're going to do, like I do in all the other videos, I'm going to, you guys have seen what it's made. That was one of the last pulls I did. It has since there's a storm just about to hit, and it's gotten extremely humid in the past hour here. So I don't know, I did this run maybe an hour ago, and it's gotten even worse. So we're going to do one more pull. We're going to see what it makes. It's been cooling off a little bit. Blower's cool, and I'm trying to... I understand that the 792 is kind of what it's making in this air, and it is what it is. He just wanted an 800 dyno number just to say he has it on a sheet. So I am going to cheat this a little bit, and I did let the car cool off with the key on, fans running to try to cool, keep cycle coolant through the supercharger and cool the blower case down, which if you let the fans run with the key running, that intercooler pump will run, and it'll cool the supercharger down over 15-20 minutes. So that's a little trick we can do with these. If the customer requests a dyno sheet that says a certain, a specific number, and he wants, I can kind of do a little bit of a hero pull. So we're going to film the hero pull. You guys saw what it made on a typical hot pull with, the hotter coolant temps and just like nominal blower temperatures. Still seeing only 10 degrees above ambient with that Whipple. These Gen 6 Whipples are, I think, best in the business right now. I don't think you can beat this for sub 1,000 or maybe sub 1,100 at the rear wheels. It's just for street cars, especially stick shift street cars. I don't think it's hard to beat this combination. I know the centrifugal 10-speed stuff works really good too, but if you want to just have an all-out fun street car, this is my choice. Me having personally owned a 2020 GT500, I'm really partial to the root / screw style blowers, and I just like that instant power for a street car. And these Gen 6 Whipples are excellent. The cooling bricks got even better, the rotors got even better, and you're basically all running, unless you're really pushing boost, you start putting 20 pounds of boost, you're going to start to see some IATs out of them. But when you're down at the 12 to 15 pound range, the intake air temps are always just over ambient. Very, very manageable. So let's do one more pull. Set the camera down. We're going to do one more pull. See if we can hit that 800 number. I don't know if we're going to, but he really wanted to see it, so hopefully we do. So let's spin one more dyno run up here, and see what happens. Alright guys, so what did I end up doing is, where I cut the video off, I ended up just heading home for the night. It was getting late anyway, and we have kind of a noise requirement, noise limitation on time into the evening, and this car is really loud. So it's the next day. It's the next morning. You can maybe see a change in the sun position and the light coming through the door there. Like I said, yeah. So I didn't do something super crazy with letting the car... I fully warmed the car back up. It's 9 a.m. here, 9:30 in the morning here, and it's almost as sticky as it was last night, humidity wise. Not quite, it's maybe a smidge better, but we got our 800. So that's what the customer wanted. He wanted to see a dyno sheet that said 800, and you can see just the very tippy top here, we were able to squeak that out. So the rest of this, kind of moving around, some of this can be attributed to like drivetrain temperature. So this was just the very, it sat overnight. This is the very first pull this morning. And sometimes when the transmission and rear axle and stuff aren't up to temperature, you can sometimes lose here. You can lose bits here and there. But again, it's pretty much overlaying. I mean, the dyno, the accuracy, I shouldn't say the accuracy, but the repeatability on a wheel dyno, on stuff making this kind of power, is going to be within 5. You're not going to make, it's not all the time you're going to overlay the same line over the top every single time. It's just, I've been doing this long enough where just you can have the same tune, you can run the car 10 minutes apart, running the same temperatures, and it's going to read a little different every single time. It's never going to read exactly the same. Normally aspirated stuff, lower horsepower stuff, you can get within 2 or 3 every time, but high horsepower stuff typically will have a, again, run to run, you'll have a little bit of a difference. But anyway, both curves, you can see the general gist of what's going on here. Again, nice broad torque curve from a Whipple. I mentioned that before. I really like the way, for me personally, again, this is a stick shift car, a street car. It's really hard to beat the power delivery of a positive displacement supercharger like that. And these new Gen 6 Whipples with the bigger throttle body, they have a bigger inlet, more open to the rotors, so they tend to make a little less boost down low, but it kind of gives you a little bit of more of a, I shouldn't say it's totally like a centrifugal, but down here you're seeing, up here we're seeing 12 pounds of boost. Down here we're seeing 8, 7. So it definitely has a ramping curve to it. But yeah, that's looking really good. Everything, as far as what I just glanced at the log before I jumped out of the car, looks really good. So we can take a look at that right now. See if I can get the glare. I'm always fighting that, especially in the morning when the sun's coming through that door, because that door faces east. So we'll start with so boost. We were talking boost. These don't have a map sensor. It's an estimated value, but with the PCM, it's an estimated value based on airflow and some algorithmic data, basically some equations that the ECU uses to come up with an estimated manifold pressure. So the estimated boost is, we're seeing about 12 pounds. So just at the very top, and I talked about, you get down here and, at 33,000 RPM, we're 7 and 8 pounds. It's about 8 pounds of boost right there. So, like I said, it'll kind of ramp in. You get about a 4-pound build across the board. But that kind of gives like a stick shift, a street car like this on street tires, a little bit more tractability. I personally, again, I just like the power delivery of this style supercharger. And these Gen 6 Whipples, I think, for that style power adder, are the best on the market right now. They have the best cooling. So the charge temperatures, the air charge temperatures, just, right now this thing is just sitting at, 100 degrees, not just sub 100 degrees. And the pulls I did yesterday were about the same. Right now we're like 96. The pulls I was doing yesterday were like at 100, like right at 100, and they just sit there the whole time. So you can see our intake air temp is mid 80s, and typically these Gen 6 Whipples, when you're cruising around, will run about 10 over ambient, and they're just that good. So they work really, really well. Timing. I got this car. We're pushing some timing on it for sure. For that type of boost, this pulley, again, it's a 3875 pulley. It's what comes in the Whipple Stage 2 kit. Low 20s, 22 maybe, just touching. I'll probably see 22. I did play with the timing up and down. typically on these Coyotes at this pulley and boost level with headers are going to be in that low 20s, that kind of 21. I could probably pick up maybe another 5 or 6 at the wheels by putting another degree in it. But typically what you see with these higher compression engines, Coyotes, LT, GM stuff, the LT1 specifically with, you know, the NA stuff that you're boosting, the higher compression stuff, is in the mid-teens. I'll kind of just start at an arbitrary spot because you'll typically see that out of like a 91 octane tune, like the, you know, like throwing a Whipple on one of these with stock manifolds and 91 octane, or like a Gen 3 or 4 F-150 with a 5 liter. Typically you're going to be kind of in that mid-teens. You jump the timing from like 14-15 to 17-18, you're going to make 50 more horsepower at the rear tires. So it's a pretty big jump per degree in the kind of the mid-teens. But once you start nearing MBT, the max brake torque that the engine's going to be happy with timing-wise, the gain per degree starts to really drop off. So, you know, from like 19 to 20, we'd probably see, you know, a 10 to 15 wheel. From 20 to 21, we're going to probably be maybe closer to the 10 horsepower. And 21 to 22, we're going to be maybe 8 horsepower. And then after that, it's a pretty sharp decline. You're going to see maybe 5 horsepower. And then after that, there's no more gain. So I usually like to be kind of about a degree backed off from the absolute limit where it's not gaining any more power. There's no sense in trying to squeak that extra 5 or 7 horsepower out of it to really just be leaning on the stock bottom end. At least in my eyes. Now, if you're out trying to set a record, or you got somebody that's fendering you out in a race and you really want to beat them, fine, okay, we'll throw that extra degree in there to see if you can gain that fender back. 5 horsepower to the tires at this power level is pretty inconsequential. You know, 10, 15, sure, but 5, it starts to become a diminishing return on how fast the car is going to accelerate. So I usually bring them back down, and that's where this car was. I tried 22 something, 22 and a half, and it didn't pick up anything. The gain from 20, I think I was, you know, here I'm at like 21.8. When I was at 20.8, the difference was like, I think 9 horsepower at the rear wheels. So I left that because that's a pretty significant gain. But again, from experience, if I threw another degree at it, it would gain maybe 5 more, maybe not even that, 3 more, possibly. And it's just not worth trying to eke that extra little bit out. It's not going to make the car any quicker. So yeah, that's, you know, and you can see that I'm letting the Freedom Executive do a little bit on the knock. It's adding some timing there. So these cars typically, maybe I'll reference Whipple's stock tunes. If you use a Whipple tune, they will use for timing, and I don't know if I've talked about this before, but they'll use the cylinder pressure limit table. And this is a table that's just kind of an absolute cap on timing. GT500s use this table, even going back to like the modular GT500s, 07 to 14s, they will use a cylinder pressure limit table as kind of the hard set for timing, and typically the cars will run right up against this table. So the borderline will be set pretty low. The MBT will be set lower than this table. The MBT tables, spark tables, will be set higher than this table. So a lot of the time with good fuel, like not good 93 octane 10%, you won't be to the MBT, but you'll be right up against this table. 2020 and up GT500s definitely run up against this table pretty much all the time if you got good fuel in them. So I kind of stick with that strategy. MBTs I'll set up a little higher than this, and obviously borderlines a smidge lower. This being an E85 car, I have the borderlines up pretty high over, you know, maybe like what a box Whipple tune would be, or even just the factory. I guess if you were to kind of extrapolate the factory timing out into higher air masses or higher loads. So I kind of set this up so the cylinder pressure limit is going to be kind of the ultimate. So you can kind of see we're running about 1.6 load near the top, so kind of in between these two. And you can see 22, if you kind of look at this, 1.4 and 1.8 are the two breakouts on load there. So I'm riding kind of right in between those two cells, so 22 and a half, 21 and a half. You're going to be right about that 22 mark. That's going to be my ultimate cap. That's where I feel safe running these combinations, this style combination with this Whipple header combination on E85. So that's going to ultimately dictate the limit on timing. And I'll, again, Whipple also uses that strategy in their tunes. But the MBT tables, like, I think, maybe map point 21 is a pretty heavily used one up here for percentages. You can see that I'm commanding, it's commanding maybe a smidge more than that. So if it could run up to the MBT, it would, and we can even look at that log, because I log MBT timing. You can see my MBT advance here is 23. Borderline I have at 20, and we're running at 21. So it's kind of floating between these two, but we're going to cap out at that cylinder pressure limit table. So just going back to this, I'm just talking about this because the HDFX timing will bring some timing in, but it's not going to be bringing in very much on an 85 car. I'll let it bring in a little bit. I like there to be a little bit of wiggle room there, just in case he gets a bad batch of fuel or something happens where obviously we're not trying to add a whole bunch and the ECU's learning a whole bunch of advance. It's just going to run up against that pressure table, and then if the knock sensors need to start taking some out, they can. So yeah, that's the timing curve. I tried some more timing down on the bottom here. Again, done enough of these where I kind of know where this needs to be. Didn't really help down there. It was a pretty marginal gain. And again, stock rods, I don't like trying to, crank the cylinder pressure super high with a bunch of timing down in the bottom end, because that's really where a lot of the damage is done when you're breaking these bottom ends, is kind of the boosted power you're making in this mid-range. Now we're not leaning on this one super hard. Like I said, we had talked to the customer yesterday about how far we're going to lean on this car, and he was content with that 800 number. So he did bring me a 3.6 pulley, but I think that would be pushing us to like an 850 type of number, which is kind of my comfortable limit for longevity on a stock bottom end. Yes, it will do it, but once you get over that 850 mark, you're going to kind of severely reduce the longevity of these bottom ends. You start seeing that 900 number. It's not if, it's when. It's just when are you going to throw a rod out of the side of the thing, and that just makes a huge mess, and it's expensive. So I know sometimes that kind of gets to be the culture with some of this stuff where it's like, yep, I blew up my car. Oh yeah, I blew up my car. Oh yeah, and it's kind of a normal thing. But I don't like having cars leave the shop being just a ticking time bomb grenade with the pin pulled on it. It's kind of pointless to me. If this guy was out racing it competitively, or again he had some sort of reason where he wanted it to be as fast as it possibly could be on the edge, sure, we'll throw the 3.6 pulley on it and send it. Or even maybe a 3.5 and send it harder than that. I mean, they'll do it, just for how long. Fueling. So I'm commanding a pretty rich mixture on this. They don't really lose a whole lot of power. We're going from like a 0.8 lambda down to a 0.79 to 7.8, ramping in towards the top. As the boost rises, I like putting more fuel into them. They don't typically lose a whole lot of power doing that, and just that a little bit extra 85 in the port helps cool stuff. So I'll typically run these higher compression NA deals a little richer. So typically, like factory strategy, will typically ramp, even on the GT500s, I keep referencing that because those are factory boosted, basically Coyote engines. So, but I run these pretty rich. I like, anything when you start getting into that peak torque zone. I mean, this thing's peaking torque about 6,000 RPM. I want to be into that richer mixture before that, so we got enough fuel. So typically you can see, typically you'll see the factory ramping it in. Even GT500s will be as lean as like 0.85 out at the bottom and kind of ramping in. So yeah, high 0.7s like this. So I'll typically leave them like that, pretty rich. So yeah, fuel trims, we should be, and I looked at glances some runs ago. So fuel trims here, what we're correcting for fuel. So these short terms, you can see we're pretty close. It's pulling just a smidge. That's where I like to see. I like to have it pulling between 0 and 5%. So you can see we're maybe just adding a little right there, but it's like 0.8 just for a blip. It's really close. The other thing you got to really watch on fueling on the Gen 3, Gen 4 stuff with port and direct injection is the blending between the two. So, again, I will reference Whipple tunes, and you can actually see the green is I have a manual Whipple tune I'm comparing to for some stuff. Just for a reference to go back to if I want to make some wild change on something. It's just a habit of mine to always have something to compare to. Whipple, and I've talked about this before, Whipple and Roush get, and I don't know this for certain, but just the buzz I've heard, and you talk to people and people in the know, Whipple and Roush get, basically they get access to Ford engineering for their tunes. They get access to a person or a team of people to help them write calibrations for their tunes that they send out with their kits. And so that being said, the Whipple tuning, the Whipple tuning from Whipple is actually pretty good. I mean, there's definitely stuff that you need to change, especially when you get into headers, and especially when you get into E85. Obviously, you got to make changes to different injectors. And one of the things that, and even over a factory tune, and I'll get to it here, is the blending between the port injection and the direct injection. So typically, you know, from like a factory Coyote, if this was a stock car, when you get into wide open throttle to the floor, you're pretty much running all direct injection. With all the fueling, 90% of the fueling is coming from direct injection. When you go to E85 with the bigger port injectors, you're going to hit the limit of those direct injectors before that. So I'll typically run them depending on how much power they make. This type of setup, 800 wheel on E, you can typically get away with about 70% on the direct. I try to run as much direct injection as possible. I just find that to make the most power, personally. I've seen some tuners just straight set this to like a 50-50, some even less. They'll really rely heavily on the port injectors. Typically, I don't see as much power, in my experience, doing that. The more direct injection you can use, the better, because the direct injectors atomize the fuel better, and there's the homogenization of the fueling and the air. The fuel in the air is better. So I'll try to run as much DI as I possibly can. This setup at this power level on E is typically, on a Gen 3 Coyote, is typically going to be about a 70% is going to kind of be your cap in the mid-range. Then towards the top, you can see that this starts to fade down to 50. Some guys just take this 50 all the way across, but I find there's a little bit of power. It's not much, maybe 5-10 horsepower and 10 foot-pounds of torque in the mid-range if you try to lean on the DI a little more. That's just my personal findings, so that's how I do it. But you definitely have to change those tables when you start getting into E85 and boost. You cannot be trying to... The computer will automatically bias towards the port injectors if it needs to, but knowing that, you might as well just set these tables so it's just doing it automatically. It's not trying to ride this line, and sometimes you can get kind of a real choppy power curve and dips in the power curve and stuff. If the DI is kind of automatically, or the PI is kind of, the ECU, the PCM is kind of automatically bringing the port injectors in, because then the DI injection timing can start to get kind of wonky as it's kind of trying to, take it and add it away to the port injectors versus just having a nice smooth fueling curve. If that makes sense to you guys. So that's how I do it. And you can see, the port injectors here are, kind of as that DI drops off, the port injectors are coming in here on this pulse width. So yeah, hopefully that covers some of this stuff. Again, I like trying to take some of the mystery out of this for you guys. I know maybe this goes over a lot of your guys' heads. You don't care. You just want to see how much power the thing makes and what the 6130 is and all that stuff. So, but my job is to analyze this stuff, make sense of it all, so you have a smooth running, smooth driving, fast vehicle. That's the point of this. So yeah, I went over boost, air temps, timing, fueling. I think that pretty much covers it on this one. I'm going to get this out on the road, do one more little test drive on it quick, and that'll wrap this one up. Taking one more look at these power curves, so if you guys are scrolling to the end. So that's a 2020 Mustang, Stage 2 Whipple, 3875 Pulley, headers, E85, 1200cc fuel injector clinic injectors, Corsa exhaust, and return style fuel system, twin pump. So pretty basic combination. I know I say basic even though it's got an added supercharger, but in the days of Mustangs and Coyote stuff being so popular out there, this is a getting to be a pretty popular combination. So, and rightfully so, you know, making some decent horsepower, touching that 800 mark. So that'll wrap it up for this video, guys. Appreciate you guys watching our channel. And I'm going to get this thing unstrapped and get it out on the street, take it for a little drive. So keep checking back on our channel for more videos, more outlaw stuff we got going on. We're building those trucks as fast as we can. They're flying off the shelf. We cannot build them fast enough. Obviously the guys are up at the track all the time doing Road America stuff. We got more track days coming, so there'll be more footage of that. And I appreciate you guys watching. I'll talk to you guys later.